Hello and shalom, brothers and sisters. Messiah Yeshua. Welcome back. I'm Jeremy, and today we're talking about secrets of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Not necessarily secrets, but we're going to look at some of the overlooked things, or things that if you've been studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, if you haven't been doing it for a long time, you may miss some things. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of truth and lies. Today we're going to look at some of the mainstream things, why they reject these as being canonical or whatnot. We're going to look at some of the things such as the Essenes or Essens, were they the Zadok priests? Because some people today are defending it and denying it. We're going to look at actually what the evidence shows. We're going to do another video on this very topic that walks you through all of the evidence, and when you, at the end of it, you're going to see that the truth is very beautiful. We're going to look at stuff like today we're going to talk about truths about the book of Enoch and Jubilees. Some stuff again about Cave 7 that we've already talked about, the mystery about it, and the commentary on the book of Romans. We're going to look at a little bit of the calendar. It's not going to be a teaching on the calendar, but we're going to look at some things that people who are studying the calendar and the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar, that some of the things that were overlooked about it for quite a while, and I think that if you know this information, it might help you come to some conclusions. We're going to look at some interesting dates. My whole purpose behind this is to get people to see something about the Dead Sea Scrolls, the truth that's hidden there, and it's beautiful, and I hope that you follow along with me through this whole thing. All right, so let's get started. So originally, these books, a lot of the books that we're going to talk about, were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but they're removed from canon. And the majority of the ones removed from canon have to do with the books that deal with the angels or the sons of God, with the calendar, and or with the Melchizedek priesthood, or also known as the Zadok priesthood, right? The sons of Zadok, or Melchizedek the righteous. And I find it interesting that when people come to the understanding of and start studying the Old Testament, instead of heeding the words of Yeshua when he says, beware of the doctrine, the leaven of the Sadducees and the Pharisees, but he never says anything about this group that we now know existed in the Dead Sea area, known as the Zadok priests, also known as the Essenes. And again, we'll get into this a little bit further, but the Essenes, I do believe, and you'll see in the next video, what is early written about them is beautiful, and it is the birth of where the New Testament comes from. But again, people will tend to, instead of heeding Yeshua's warning when they're trying to learn these things, they go right on over to what do the rabbis say, the ancient Sadducees and Pharisees, and they look at their writings such as the Talmud, the Mishnah, the Zohar, and all these different things, some of which do have to do with biblical things, but mostly they do not. Whereas those found in the Dead Sea area, these scrolls, all of them, point you and push you to the study of the Torah and keeping God's commandments and love of man. And that's what we will see when we read all of the sources about the Essenes in the next videos. All of it was saying how these people were so pious and loving and dedicated to strict observance of the Torah. But we want to disregard what they have to say and reject what they have to say. We will also find that these Essenes, the Zadok priests, that their prophecies did not fail. They were right all the time. We're also going to see that they prophesied about Herod becoming king and so forth. Anyway, we'll see that in the next video. But my point here is that so many people are going to the left side, the Sadducees and Pharisees, the dark side, the one that Yeshua said, don't learn their doctrine, don't learn their leaven, beware of it. But this other Jewish sect that was known for their strict observance to the law and love of man will reject what they had and what they wrote and what they taught. All right, so with that said, let's continue forward and talk a little bit about these Essenes. So the main ancient references to the Essenes were Philo of Alexandria. He was the first. Then you'll have Josephus, I didn't put that in order, and Pliny the Elder. And some of the things that, just a quick run through, Philo of Alexandria is in Every Good Man is Free book, chapter or verse 75 through 87. And basically a quick gist, it says there is a portion of the Jewish people called the Essenes, over 4,000. So in the time that Philo was writing about it, he says that there were 4,000 of them. We also know that there was an Essene gate. So these were not just some heretical sect or some, what people will say, a cult out in the wilderness. They were not. They were very pious. That's what all of them write about. They were very strict observant to the Torah and the love of man, and there was over 4,000 of them. But they weren't all there in the Dead Sea. That was their headquarters. They also, some of them lived in villages. They possessed no slaves, holding all men to be free and equal. It says they devote their attention to the moral part of philosophy, though not philosophy, but to the Torah. And we will see that as we go through in the next videos. Pliny the Elder, he only writes some quick stuff about him. Being a Greek, he says, on the west side of the Dead Sea dwells the Essenes, a people unique and admirable beyond all others, without women, he says. Now, that is true, but it's also a little bit untrue, because what we'll later read from also Josephus confirms that there was a side of this sect that did not take wives so they could study and stay focused on serving God and learning about God. Whereas the other side, they would take wives to further the human race and so forth. So yes, you did have a part of them that did not have wives, but you also had a part of them that did. And that's the part that people don't ever hear about. And in Christianity, do we not hear the same thing from Paul when he says, I wish that all men were like me? And he doesn't have a wife. But that if you have to marry, it is okay. And I find that very interesting. We're also going to read things about the Essenes, how they had this 3-year initiation process. And also for a woman that was going to marry one of their men, a 3-year initiation process. We find that Paul goes back to Damascus for how many years? 3 years, while he gets initiated into this process. Anyway, so Pliny the Elder, he says, without women renouncing love entirely. Well, what he's talking about there, I believe, is marriage, and that's not the case. And it's not love, we know, because these people are written for their love of man and love of God. And we will see that again in the videos to come. Without money, again, they had money, they had a lot of it, but they put it all into a community, just as we see in Acts. They all put it in community. They sold they sold everything they had so that all people were in community. This is the exact same thing we see in the New Testament, but it's written about what they did there at this sect, which people would call a cult. And they are not. They're the very forerunners preparing the way for Yeshua's coming, the new covenant to the house of Judah first. And then after the rejection by many, it went out to the Gentiles. All right, Flavius Josephus, he writes the most about it. We will go through all of these main writers because this is where everybody draws their information from. And later on, we'll see that all of the false information still comes from these, but they renounce it and so forth. All right. So additional ancient mentions real quick. There was Diochrysostom. He was a Greek writer, and he simply just notes that there are Essenes near the Dead Sea, right around 100 AD. Hippolytus of Rome, he, in his refutation of all heresies, he preserves some Essene material, likely from Josephus. It may have come from Josephus, right around 200 AD. And then Epiphanius of Salamis, in his Panarion in the 4th century, catalog of Jewish sects included the Essenes. And what we're going to find is that when Josephus writes about the sects, several times in the Wars and in Antiquities of the Jews, he writes that there were 3 sects, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, and the Essens. He leaves the E off the very end, and he calls them Essens. All right. We're not going to get too much into these here because, like I said, we will do a whole video on all 3 of these, and we're going to go through the quotes and connect them to both the Dead Sea Scrolls and to New Testament theology and Yeshua. So key points, they were devoted to the God of Israel, they studied Scripture, and they were ethically holy and just. There was no hint of pagan theology written from Philo of Alexandria at all. That is a later lie that creeps in, that one of the main things that people like to say about the Essenes, and I too used to say this, is that the Essens or Essenes were above En-Gedi on the mountains, and it's not talking about those at the Dead Sea. And we'll read that I don't believe that that's true anymore. I believe that when Philo writes about them, and anybody writes about the Essenes, these three writers, that they're referring to those at Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they called their settlement Damascus, and they called themselves children of light, followers of the way, Zadok priests, and the keepers of the covenant, of the new covenant. All right. So Josephus here, he writes about them, but again, just real quick, we will get into this in the next video. Strict Torah observance, rigor Sabbath keeping, ritual purity, baptism, and belief in resurrection and immortality of the soul. And now what we understand about the soul, when you die, the soul does not die, but it goes, it will be resurrected. You will then face judgment, and then in the ultimate judgment, a soul can be destroyed by the Father, right? The two deaths. I've talked about this in many of my videos. Yeshua says, don't fear those that kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but fear him who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna. And so when we do go into the video and read about Josephus this next time, he never associates them with any pagan worship god or rites. It is all to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And they preserve everything from the original first writings. And we're going to read in here what the very first book ever written by any of these Jewish authors or Israelite authors or Hebrew or going way back. It's going to tell us what the very first book was, and you probably won't be surprised, but we'll see. All right, Pliny the Elder, again, very quick, he writes about them, and he does not accuse them of pagan rites. He does not associate them with a mystery religion. He, again, if anyone would have labeled them pagan, it would have been Pliny the Elder, a Roman author, but he does not. Okay? It's not until much later, starting in the 4th century, really, that they start getting this. And now today, somehow the Essenes have become, all these different things, and we'll look at some of the things they call them. It says, so where do the pagan Essene claims come from? Later Ptolemaics, later Christian polemic in the 4th century. Church writers like Epiphanius sometimes portrayed Jewish sects because they were a Jewish sect. He called them legalistic, angel-focused, and heretical because they believed in keeping the Torah. But in today's Christianity, many say, oh, that Torah is done away with, it's obsolete, it's no good, it's a burden. No, it never was. Now the priesthood has changed, yes, and the way we do sacrificial and the way we do worship, we do spiritual sacrifices. It says, but even Epiphanius never called the Essenes pagan, only that they were mistaken, and that their rituals and keeping and their observances were obsolete. He says this is theological polemic, not a historical description. All right. So, modern speculation, not ancient sources. So today, many people claim that they were Zoroastrian, that they were Egyptian or Pythagorean, that they were a solar pagan keeping group. Some from the 19th century scholars, not ancient texts. These theories are usually based on angelology, dualism, light versus darkness, and a solar calendar. We're going to look at a little bit of the calendar today, knowing that it was not a solar calendar. Their calendar in the Dead Sea Scrolls used the sun, the moon, and the stars for all of it, for the whole calendar. We're going to see that today. It says, but none of these equal paganism. The angels, they did not equal pagan gods. Then they did not worship angels, but they wrote about them. They had angels that spoke to them, and so forth, just as we read in many of the other biblical texts that are canon. They believe that dualism exists in biblical texts. we also see it in Isaiah, Daniel, Qumran. I do my whole teachings on dualism, that there's light versus darkness. And that's right from the very beginning to the very end. Because we were originally created light, good, life. And then they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, light and darkness. And that's when the dualism came in. All right. Again, solar calendars, just because it's not, like I said, many people say it's a solar calendar, but even if it was only a solar calendar, it's not solar worship. But it's not a solar calendar. It is sun, moon, and stars. And you're going to see a little bit of how that plays out today. All right, Dead Sea Scrolls, widely linked to Essene thought, are saturated with Torah. They're obsessed with covenant faithfulness. They are hostile to foreign nations and idols. Not hostile as in going to war against them, but teaching against them. But they encourage converting to the light. They're intensely anti-pagan. They are not pagan when we would say a pagan is against what the Bible says. They are completely for it and strict adherents to it. A pagan sect would not condemn idolatry. They would not rewrite and keep all of these biblical texts. All of the texts there found, one way or another, were about the Bible, were about the Torah, the prophets, and the writings. They were about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not pagan. All right, bottom line. No ancient source states that the Essenes or Essens were pagan. All primary witnesses describe them as a Jewish sect, stricter than others in Torah observance. Claims of pagan influence arise only in modern speculation, not ancient testimony. And again, we now have this plethora of information found from these people that were Jews, that believed that their fellow brother Jews on the Sadducees and Pharisees side were of the darkness. And when Yeshua comes, he warns us against the Sadducees and Pharisees. But as we have read and will read in the next videos, that there were over 4,000 in just that time. But Yeshua mentions nothing about them. Why? Because they were the ones with John the Baptist and his followers that were learning and seeing the Messiah who they had prophesied about and waited for come into the world. All right. Moving on from there, we will go in depth in that in the next video, and you're going to see the beautiful birth of Christianity found at the Dead Sea and at the Essenes. All right. So we talked about this, Cave 7, Dead Sea Scrolls Cave 7. On this one side over here, we had all these books that were positively identified. The Septuagint book of Exodus. We had books from Baruch and many sources of Enoch and a book of parts of Jubilees. On the left side here, and that book of Baruch up there at the top is letter from the letter of Jeremiah. On the left side, on the right side here, we have all these other fragments that were positively identified by the same person as being from the New Testament. However, modern scholars will reject that, but nobody's ever been able to completely prove him wrong, meaning nobody's ever been able to go in there and say, yes, these are not from those, they are from here. But they do fit what he has said. And not only that, there's a commentary on Romans. So that means whoever was there at Qumran in this sect, that they were not only studying, but they were writing these, because these are not just one copy of the document. They found several different copies of Mark that were all different. 3 different copies, 4 different copies of Mark. If that's the case, that means that what were they doing there? I believe this is where they were producing the scrolls to be able to take them and send them out to the world from this point until 70 AD. And then they preserved them for us in these last days, again, to prepare the way for Yeshua to return. Okay, so here's a picture of some of them. Here's how they titled them. This is right from the Dead Sea Scrolls website that you can go to. They say unidentified, unidentified. That's wrong. They were identified by the papyrologist who identified them as New Testament documents, but they will not put that there. This is the commentary on Romans that they find, and more pictures of them and so forth. But again, they will not allow that to be claimed that that's a commentary on Romans, because that would mean not only did the book of Romans have to already be written, but that they made a commentary on it and stored it there. Just as we see Paul was going out to Rome and coming back to Jerusalem, all of this stuff was taking place before 70 AD, before the destruction of Jerusalem. The commentary on Romans, it says here, that's 7Q19, it says some small Greek papyrus fragments from Qumran Cave 7 were controversially proposed in the 1970s by Spanish papyrologist Joseph O'Callaghan to include New Testament materials, including one fragment he suggested may represent a commentary on Romans. So, at least with the commentary on Romans, he suggested that it may be a commentary. Not that it was, but the other, he says that the included New Testament material. It included, it didn't say may. That's what he puts. But the commentary, he suggests that it may represent, and words mean things. All right, and it was alongside other New Testament texts. And for those of you that don't know, down there at Qumran, this is where all the caves were that they found, and also some down at Masada and along that whole Dead Sea area. All right, so here's a list of all the books that were found in what caves. And there were several copies of all of these. Maybe not just one or two, but multiple copies, because there was almost 1,000. But what I want to point out here is that, and you've heard me say this before, Enoch and Jubilees. The number one amount of books found in the Dead Sea Scrolls was Psalms. The number 2 was Deuteronomy. The number 3 was Enoch. 25 separate scrolls found. Then Genesis. More than Genesis. Enoch more than Genesis. And what we'll find out is that these scrolls, we're going to read from them, that Enoch was claimed in the writings by Moses to be the very first book ever written. And that's Enoch. So thus, why they held it in such high regard. And then after Isaiah, the next book is Jubilees, 21 copies. And so also with those, you can see here in Cave 1, books of Jubilees were found, books of Enoch were found. Okay, several different books. Also, Cave 2, books of Jubilees, books of Enoch. So not all in one cave. In Cave 3, books of Jubilees and books on angels. Also in Cave 4, various books of Enoch, various books of Jubilees. Also again in Cave 4, suspected to be Jubilees, and then also the Genesis of Jubilees, suspected. And then also more books of giants and a pseudo-Enoch books of giants. And then in Cave 6, there it is again, Enoch and giants. And in Cave 7, obviously we saw the list of Enoch. So not only was Enoch found in all of these others, the difference between Cave 7 and the other ones is Cave 7, it's written in Greek. So not only did they have multiple books of Enoch in different types of Hebrew, but also they had one in Greek. And these all predated the coming of Yeshua. Okay? And then also in Cave 11, Jubilees. So multiple books of Enoch and Jubilees found in all of these caves. Not in one, as if they were storing a pagan document somewhere, but they held them in high regard, and not only in Hebrew and different forms of Hebrew, Aramaic, and so forth, but in Greek. Another thing I wanted to point out was in these caves there's many documents pointing to New Jerusalem. Cave 2, Cave 4, again in Cave 4, Cave 5, multiple documents speaking about New Jerusalem, which is not a New Testament thing. It is a Old Testament and before, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, before the time of Yeshua thing. Also, rituals of marriage. So again, when Pliny the Elder writes that they did not marry, that is false. They did. But there was part of them that did not, that devoted their time to studying the law and to God without having to deal with marriage. And that's what Paul tells us, that if you get married, you are obligated to take care of your wife and children. So that retracts from being able to serve God in the kingdom. Though you still can, but you can't do it as much or as efficiently because you still have to take care of a family. Also, we see the book of Melchizedek, which writes all about Melchizedek, which in our modern canon, we only hear of him mentioned twice, in Psalms and back in Genesis, and then again in the New Testament. But he's written all about in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then also calendrical scrolls. There's not just one, there's many. And you can include Enoch and Jubilees as calendrical scrolls. But these are separate from Enoch and Jubilees, and they have to do just with the moon and the sun and the stars. All of it, not just a solar calendar. Multiple calendrical documents. All right. So with that, look through all these and you're going to see a ton of information that pre-existed what we know as canon, and none of it has to do with pagan information. It all has to point and do with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But they get rid of it because it talks about the calendar, the priesthood, and angels. That is primarily why they are rejected. And if you watch any of my megalithic series, you can see that I do them to show that before the flood there was a megalithic world, which many of the early church fathers, the Dead Sea Scrolls authors, all of them believed that the angels came down and gave knowledge to mankind, and they created a megalithic worldwide civilization that ended up being wiped out by a flood because of the wickedness of the world. All right, moving on. So in the Dead Sea Scrolls, okay, there was only one complete book ever found. Complete. That was the scroll of Isaiah. And we have that, and they put it in the museum and everything. But that is the only book. And so with that, I'm bringing that up because all of the others were just fragments, some big, some little. The other biggest book, I think, was either the Community Rule or the Damascus document. Almost complete, but not totally. But all the other ones were able to identify these other books, and when we, from the fragments, we can go to the books we have today and go, yeah, that's still there, right? So then we can rest assured that the rest of it is still correct. Does that make sense? So we know that the book of Isaiah, because we have that whole scroll, and so we're able to go and see, yeah, that's pretty much correct. Yeah, there's some spelling and variations and little things, but it doesn't change the prophecies and the writings and the meaning. It's only just little changes over time, but nothing that takes away drastically. So with that, also the fragments that we find from, say, Genesis, well, we can trust that the book of Genesis that we have today is accurate because we find that the pieces that they found there match with what we have. So therefore we can go, okay, the pieces that we don't have, we can say that probably is accurate as well. But we do that with all of the other biblical books. But you know what book we don't do that with? The book of Enoch. We'll talk about that here in a minute because there's a part of the book of Enoch that we didn't find in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So because of that, people reject the whole book. Now there are those that don't, but they do reject that part that wasn't found. We'll talk about that here in a minute as we get into Enoch. So let's look at it. What do they reject? Well, what they reject, because it's not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is the book of the parables, and that's chapters of First Enoch. This is not Second Enoch, Third Enoch. Second Enoch, Third Enoch were not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Those are later writings. However, First Enoch predates Yeshua by almost up to 300 years. Okay, but the parables of Enoch, chapters 37 through 71, were not found in there. So most scholars will reject that. But because of that, they kind of reject the whole book. It says, no fragments of this section have been reliably identified among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Most scholars, not all, agree this portion is absent from Qumran corpus, which may suggest it was composed later or was not used by the Qumran community. So what's important about this section is if they did in fact find this section of the Dead Sea Scrolls, it would prove Yeshua is the Messiah, because everything that was written is basically what we know about Yeshua. It is so much doctrine and theology of what they were looking for the Messiah to be and when for him to come and so forth, that they believed it was written after the fact. And so because the Ethiopian book of Enoch, I think the latest date of it was like 1100 AD, they find that in that book, it's still preserved with pretty much what was written in the Dead Sea, except for it doesn't have the parables of Enoch, chapters 37 through 71. But do you know what it did have? All these other books. The Book of the Watchers. That whole story about angels and coming down and procreating with women and the world getting destroyed, and them writing on rock and so forth and carving into stone and building houses with stone. Yep, that's all there. However, they will reject it, even though it predates Yeshua by 300 years. Book of Parables, not found. The astronomical, heavenly luminaries, the calendar stuff, 72 to 82, that is in there. That they found that in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Predating, again, Yeshua, and by 300 years. So that calendar, they know that that book of Enoch was at least a few hundred years before Yeshua. And there's no writings to refute it before then or during the first century. It's not until later that that calendar starts getting refuted, but it is the Sadducees and Pharisees who did refute it in that day. All right, dream visions, the animal apocalypse, where it talks about different nations being different animals, and which nation is which animal. That's in there. The epistle of Enoch and the apocalypse of weeks, the 10 weeks of 700-year periods. 7 is the weeks. That's in there for a 7,000-year period. The birth of Noah, or the book of Noah, is also in there. And so all of those are in there, but many people will go, get rid of the book of Enoch. That's all false. But the only thing that they know that was not there is the parables. And it's not that it's incorrectly translated. No, it's there. There's little translation errors, but they will reject it because the whole thing wasn't there. And let me read you some of the stuff from the chapters that were rejected. Like Enoch 48:2, it says, "In that hour was the Son of Man, or the Son of Adam, invoked before Yahweh of hosts, and his name in the presence of the Ancient of Days. Before the sun and the stars were created, before the stars of heaven were formed, his name was invoked in the presence of Yahweh of hosts. And a support he shall be, and he shall be the light of nations. He shall be the hope of those whose hearts are troubled. All who dwell on the earth shall fall down and worship before him, shall bless and glorify him, and sing praises to the name of Yahweh of hosts. Therefore, the elect and concealed one existed in his presence before the world was created and forever." So here it's saying that this son of Adam will be worshipped and will be the light of nations. And he will be the hope of those hearts that are troubled. He will be blessed and glorified. And he existed before the world was. Well, we can't have that there was a son of Adam that was with God at the very beginning. So they reject it. Okay, but we see here, right, that chapters 91 through 105 and 106 through 108 were found there. Well, here you go, 104. Some say it's 105. Either way, both found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. What does it say? It says, "In which they shall rejoice, and all the righteous shall be rewarded. Who from these shall acquire the knowledge of every upright," Ishar, where we get the word Israel, the upright, "path. In those days," says Yahweh. Who's speaking? It's Yahweh. "They shall call to the children of the earth and make them listen to their wisdom. Show them that you are their leaders, and that remuneration," the paying of debts is what that word means, "shall take place over the whole earth. For I and my son will forever hold communion with them in the paths of uprightness." Ishar. Wait a minute, God had a son in the book of Enoch 300 years before the Son of God comes to the earth? When John writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and he became flesh," he was with God and he was God? Yes. And so people will reject the parables because they can't find them, but they can't reject this because it was there. And there's many other testimonies like this that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls that predate Yeshua by hundreds of years. And not only that, the book of Enoch, it was rumored that there was a whole book found there, right? It says that this rumor stems mainly from the statements attributed to John Strugnell, the former chief editor. This is the chief editor of the Dead Sea Scrolls editorial team. According to several online summaries of reports about his comments, he commented on this, and several people wrote about it. Strugnell claimed that in 1990 he was shown a microfilm of what he described as a complete Aramaic manuscript of Enoch that included the whole thing, and that he believed it was found in Cave 11, the same cave that yielded another Enoch text like Jubilees and the Melchizedek fragment. This was a quote. This was from the chief editor, but people will, no, that's not true. It's alleged that the manuscript is reportedly in private hands, possibly acquired by private collectors or investors, and never made available to scholars or published. But it did get microfilmed. But we don't have it today. This is just hearsay, speculation. We don't know. All right. So who started rejecting the book of Enoch? Well, in 160 to 240 AD was Julius Africanus. It says in his writing he dismissed the Enochian tradition regarding the fallen angels and the Nephilim, arguing instead for a more symbolic or allegorical interpretation. So he didn't believe it was literal, he believed it was allegorical. But he still gave credence to the book of Enoch, but he just said, that didn't literally happen. That's just allegorical. And so as the time goes on, we start to see that many of the church fathers believe in a more allegorical interpretation, whereas today and also the New Testament teaches a literal, yes, it literally happened, but it is also symbolic and allegorical for a future event, right? And we see that with Adam and Eve, with Joseph, with Jacob, with David, with Joshua. All of these are pictures and shadows. They literally happened, but they are also symbolic and allegorical of Yeshua and or his body. All right, later, St. Augustine of Hippo, in 354 to 430 AD, he rejected first Enoch, asserting in the city of God that the sons of God in Genesis 6 were not fallen angels, but rather descendants of Seth. And that is what most people hold today about Genesis 6, is that it was not angels that came down and procreated, but it was sons of Seth that did. Even though the books of Jubilees, the book of Enoch, several fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and multiple early church fathers prior to these dates claimed that what happened in Enoch was literal, and they believed it to be either prophetic and scriptural. It says, while some early church fathers like Tertullian, they accepted first Enoch as authoritative, it gradually fell out of favor, especially in the Latin church, and was ultimately excluded from biblical canon, except the Ethiopian Christian church kept it as canon. They preserved it, and so did the Dead Sea Scrolls community. So, who also of the 1st century and 2nd century kept it? Well, Barnabas, he believed it was part of Scripture. Justin Martyr, Theophilus of Antioch, so the Eastern Church and in Antioch, also the Western Church, right? Athenagoras of Athens in 133 to 190 kept it, believed it, right? Not only them, but Irenaeus of Lyons. Irenaeus was either a direct disciple of Polycarp or was with Polycarp a disciple of John the Baptist. Either way, believed it to be Scripture. And also, we have Clement of Alexandria. So even down in Egypt, all the churches around the area, as they were growing and producing, preserved Enoch as a true prophet in Scripture. And I find it interesting that the Eastern Church of Antioch and so forth later on goes to have a battle between the Western Church of Rome over keeping the feasts, right, and Passover, and switching to Sunday instead of doing the Passover. Western Rome went to Sunday. Eastern Church kept the Passover on the actual biblical day of the event. All right, Tertullian also, Origen as well. Though Origen never disputed it, but he acknowledged that there was a dispute between people at that time, but he himself quotes from it, but he never actually says that it's scripture. But we do have, Commodianus, some of these names. Lactantius, they also use Enoch. So the keynote, first Enoch, was mainstream in early Christianity until 3rd and 4th century. It was rejected by these two, and it was preserved as canon in the Ethiopian church, and canon by those in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they constantly write about it and teach from it. All right. So you've heard me say it many times in the past about the book of Enoch. Yeshua answered when he's the woman that marries 7 brothers, whose wife will she be? Yeshua answers and says to them, you do err not knowing what? The scriptures, nor the power of God, for in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of God in heaven. There's nowhere in any scripture that tells us that angels don't marry nor are given in marriage. There's only one book that is found anywhere that says this, and that's the book of Enoch. And this part was not rejected, and it was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so here Yeshua is saying that they don't know the scriptures, therefore they don't know that angels don't marry and are not given in marriage. And I've quoted that from Enoch before, and we'll do it again later when I actually do an Enoch video. All right, so only found in Enoch. So what I want to do is go to one of the big places where Enoch is rejected. Brothers in Yeshua in the faith have recently done videos about this chapter, chapter 71, to refute Enoch as pagan, as unauthoritative, as false. And I'm going to go through and talk about it because I believe their argument is false. I believe their argument holds no weight, and I'm going to refute that here. I won't use their names, but you may know them. Again, if you do, I consider them a brother in the faith, but I consider them mistaken. All right, moving forward. So in Enoch 71, we're going to go through this chapter real quick. It says, afterward, my spirit was concealed. This is Enoch. Ascending into the heavens, I beheld the sons of the holy angels treading on the flame of fire, whose garments and robes were white, and whose countenance were transparent as crystal. I saw 2 rivers of fire glittering like the hyacinth. Then I fell on my face before Yahweh Tzavaot, Yahweh of hosts. And Michael, one of the archangels, took me by the right hand, raised me up, and brought me out where was every secret mercy and secret righteousness. He showed me all the hidden things of the extremities of heaven, all the receptacles of the stars, and the splendors of all from whence they went forth before the face of the holy. And he concealed the spirit of Enoch in the heaven of heavens. There I beheld in the midst of that light a building raised with stones of ice, and in the midst of these stones tongues of living fire. Right? We saw tongues of fire in Acts. Anyway, my spirit saw round the circle of his flaming habitation, on one of its extremities, rivers full of living fire, which encompassed it. Right? Goes on, then the seraphim, the cherubim, and the ophanim surrounded it. These are those who never sleep, but watch the throne of his glory. And I beheld angels, innumerable, thousands of thousands, and myriads, who surround that habitation. Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, Panuel, and the holy angels who were in the heavens above went in and out of it. And Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel went out of that habitation, New Jerusalem. And holy angels innumerable, with them was the Ancient of Days, whose head was white as wool, and pure, and his robe was indescribable. And this is where it gets important. Then I fell upon my face, while all my flesh was dissolved, or it got destroyed, and my spirit became changed. This is interesting that this event that's happening right now, we read about something similar. Paul says, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. Well, here we see Enoch being changed. And I cried out with a loud voice, with a powerful spirit. Oh, wasn't there a loud voice there too? The sound of a trumpet? Blessing, glorifying, and exalting. And those blessings which proceeded forth from my mouth became acceptable in the presence of the Ancient of Days. So he's changed, and now his blessings and his glorifying and his exalting becomes acceptable. That's interesting. When we have a change, we turn from darkness to light, and we receive the Ruach HaKodesh, our sacrifices, our blessing, our glorifying, and our exalting become acceptable. In Job it says, for I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth, and though after my skin dissolves or is destroyed, this body yet in my flesh shall see God. Is not this the event that is happening to Enoch right here? We see him changing in the presence of the Ancient of Days. Is that not the same thing that happened to Yeshua? Well, let's keep reading, because this is where the controversy comes in. It says, and the Ancient of Days came with Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Penuel, with thousands of thousands and myriads, which could not be numbered. Then that angel came to me, and with his voice saluted me, saying, you are the son of Adam. Or some translations would say, you are that son of Adam, who is born for righteousness. And righteousness has rested upon you. And the righteousness of the Ancient of Days shall not forsake you. So this is where many will say that Enoch is being called the son of Adam, the son of man, that is the Messiah. And so many teach that this is saying that Enoch is the Messiah. Now, I've read the book of Enoch multiple times. I've listened to audio versions of it and so forth, and never did I come away thinking that this is telling me that Enoch is the Messiah. Why? Because all through the book of Enoch, we see Enoch seeing this Son of Man. He's seeing him and asking who he is. And he's hearing him being named. And this person that he keeps seeing is before all things. But he's wondering, who is this? And they're saying that, it's saying right here, he is Enoch. That's not the case, I believe, at all. You see, if that were the case, then we would see things in the Bible like this, where it says, and Yahweh said unto Moses, I have made you a god to Pharaoh, and Aaron your brother shall be your prophet. Did Moses actually become a god that can create worlds and so forth? No. We're seeing this as an allegory. It's a picture. It's a shadow of what's going to take place before Pharaoh and God, before the adversary and our Redeemer. Also, what about in Zechariah when Joshua, it says, then take silver and gold, make crowns, and put them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, right? Zadok, the Zadok priesthood. But why is Joshua given a crown? He's a king and a priest? Well, I thought that's only the Messiah. It says, and speak to him, saying, thus speak Yahweh of hosts, saying, behold, the man whose name is the branch. So, look at here, Joshua is the Messiah. No, he is a shadow and a picture. This literally happened with Joshua, the high priest, but it's a picture of Yeshua, the high priest of the Melchizedek order. It says, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of Yahweh. So Joshua is the one that gets to build God's temple, the heavenly temple? No, it's Yeshua. But this is a picture of Yeshua, just like what's happening to Enoch is a picture of what will happen to the Son of Man, to Yeshua, and to his body. That is us. Also in Job, and you have said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? Well, who is the servant? Well, that's Yeshua. We read all throughout the Bible that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, Ishar. I thought only Yeshua was perfect. He is a picture of Yeshua, one that fears God and hates evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you moved me against him to destroy him without cause. Was Yeshua destroyed without cause? They had no cause to destroy him, but there was a cause for him to be destroyed to redeem us, because death passed to all mankind, and Yeshua was not under that death penalty. Therefore, he then could pay it for us. Well, how about in Isaiah? It says, but you, Israel, are my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend. We're going to talk a little bit more about my friend at the end here later. But here, we know that that's a picture of Yeshua, not Israel, not Jacob, though it's literally speaking to them, but it's ultimately allegorically speaking of Yeshua. He says, I will take you from the ends of the earth and called you from the chief men. Therefore you said, you are my servant. I have chosen you and have not cast you away. Behold, my servant whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delights. I have put my spirit upon him, right? When he read from the scriptures, he said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and he has anointed me. And he says right here, you shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. That's Yeshua, the goodness of God, who became flesh, the Son of God. All right. So now moving forward, now with that we see that what's happening to Enoch, what I want to also show you isn't literal. He sees it. It's a vision that he's getting. They are all visions that Enoch is getting. And he's seeing what's going to happen to the Son of Man, the head, which is Yeshua, and those to follow his body at a later date, the resurrection. That's why he's being called, you are that son of Adam. Not that he was the Messiah, but what happened to him is what is going to be the Messiah, because the Torah and everything written is about Yeshua. He said, on you shall and this is where it says this, right? 71:19 in Enoch. And he said, on you shall he confer peace in the name of the existing world. For from thence has peace gone forth since the world was created. And thus shall it happen to you forever and ever. Well, I thought it just did. No, he's saying it will happen to you forever and ever. All who shall exist and who shall walk in your what? Oh, path of righteousness. What did Yeshua do? He came to show us that path, what walking in good looks like, what walking in the light looks like. What God originally intended for us, the good. Yeshua was the visible image of that goodness. It says, walk in your path of righteousness, shall not forsake you forever. Those that choose to walk this path will not be forsaken. It goes on, with you shall their habitation, and with you their lot. Nor from you shall they be separated forever. So they're also going to be with him. He's part of the body. And thus shall length of days be with the Son of Adam. He doesn't, right? Because the Son of Adam, the Son of Man, is Yeshua. He is the head. We are the body. Enoch is part of that body. Thus peace shall be to the righteous, and the path of integrity shall the righteous pursue, in the name of Yahweh of hosts, forever and ever. So what I want to point out is that was chapter 79. That was rejected, right? But later in 83, this one is not rejected, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is Enoch speaking. He says, now I have shown you, my son Methuselah, every sight which I saw prior to your birth. I will relate another vision. So Enoch was shown a vision of the resurrection and the Son of God. It was a vision. It goes on, which I saw before I was married. They resemble each other. The first was when I was learning a book, a sefer. And the other, before I was married to your mother, I saw a potent vision. On account of these things, beside Yahweh, I was lying down in the house of my grandfather, Malalal. I saw in a vision heaven thrown down and removed. This is at the end. And that's what we read in Enoch 1:1 opens right up. It's all about visions. He's going to see visions of the end. That's what it's about. It says the word of blessings of Enoch, how he blessed the elect and righteous, right? Yeshua is the head, we are the body, all the elect and righteous, who were to exist in the time of trouble, rejecting all the unrighteous and wicked. Enoch, a righteous man, part of that body, who with God answered and spoke while his eyes were opened. Oh, he had eyes to see. And he saw a holy what? Vision in the heavens. This the angels showed me. From them I heard all the things and understood that I saw that which will not take place in this generation, but in a generation which is to succeed at a distant period on account of the elect. What was that distant period? It told you at the very beginning. It's the time of trouble. Whose trouble? Jacob's trouble, I believe, at the end. And so all of this that we're going to see is about the end. Okay. Last thing I wanted to go back to is Enoch 45:4, the changing of the heavens. And he sees that when they will be changed. But it goes on halfway through the verse. I'll start here in verse 5. It says, I will also change the earth. He's going to change the heavens and illuminate them. We see 7 times brighter in another area. But he says, I will bless it and cause those whom I have elected to dwell upon it. But those who have committed sin and iniquity shall not inhabit it, for I have marked their proceedings. Remember, there's 2 marks, the mark of God and the mark of the beast. The mark of God is his commandments, his laws, his ways, his Sabbaths, his Torahs on our hearts, on our forehead, and on our right hand, the things that we do and meditate on. Whereas he marked the others with a different mark, right? On their right hand, their forehead, the things that they do and meditate on, things of the flesh and of this world. But he says, my righteous ones will I satisfy with peace. Oh, there's that word. The only one that brings peace is the day of peace, when Yeshua returns for 1,000 years. It starts with fire, it ends with fire. But for a 1,000-year period between it, there is no fire. It is rest and peace and righteousness, no war, no killing of anything. It says, before me, but the condemnation of sinners shall draw near, that I may destroy them from the face of the earth. All right. So I wanted to bring that up with Enoch. That's pretty much the biggest thing that people use to reject it, is that, the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's parts of it missing. And the part that's missing, they want to reject because they say that, don't read that because it's saying that Yeshua is not the Messiah. I believe that is not the case, but I believe it's showing him. Enoch was the first one to see the resurrection. That's what I believe he was seeing. Not only of Yeshua, but of him as the body of Yeshua as well. Because we too are Yeshua. We are Israel. Yeshua is Israel. It was written about him. He is the most upright. And he is the head, we are the body. All right, moving forward, let's look at the book of Jubilees. I don't think there's as much of the book of Jubilees that I included as Enoch. So, all right, Jubilees 1:5. I just wanted to put this. Jubilees is considered the writer that it's Torah, and it's written by Moses. It says in Jubilees 1:5, it says, and Moses was on the mount 40 days and 40 nights. And God taught him the earlier and the latter history of the divisions of all the days of the Torah and of the testimony. And he said, incline your heart to every word which I shall speak to you on this mount, and write them in a book, in order that their generations may see how I have not forsaken them for all the evil which they have wrought in transgressing the covenant which I established between me and you for their generations this day on Mount Sinai. So he's going to write this book, and we'll see that it's the book of Jubilees. It obviously is a book of Jubilees, but he's also told to write the Jubilees, and that's what he does. But it's called Torah. It's said to be part of Torah. Thus, probably why there was more books of this than most of the other books of the Torah. Okay. In Jubilees 4:17 it says this. And Enoch was the first among men that were born on earth who learned writing and knowledge and wisdom, and who wrote down the signs of heaven according to the orders of their months in a book, that men might know the seasons of the years according to the order of their separate months. So Enoch was the first one to write, and the very first book was what? Enoch. But what people will say is that, well, Enoch's not that old, it's only 300 years. Well, they didn't have the preservation of these books. They had to keep copying them over time and over time. Yes, the oldest copies we have are 300 that were found in the Dead Sea. But there may be more out there that are older than that. But most likely they've been destroyed because it's so old. That's why they kept copying them, was to preserve them. Okay. Also in Jubilees 10:13 it says, and Noah wrote down all the things in the book. And we instruct, this is the angels, and we instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. Well, this is the book of medicinal herbs and so forth that Noah wrote. We don't have that today, but that would be nice to have. Maybe they did find it, and maybe they keep it from the public because there's so much that's money made on man-made medicines. I don't know. Anyway, so there was a book of Noah also written. There is a separate book of Noah at the end of the book of Enoch, but I don't think it's there because it doesn't talk about the medicine. Okay. And then also in Jubilees 32:26 says, he, Jacob, also, Israel, says, went up from him, and he awoke from his sleep, and he remembered everything which he had read and seen. And he wrote down all the words which he had read and seen. So even Jacob had a book that he had wrote. And also in Jubilees it says, and do you, Moses, write down for yourself all these words which I declare to you on this mountain, the first and the last, which shall come to pass, in all the divisions of the days, in the Torah, and in the testimony, and in the weeks, and in the Jubilees of eternity, until I descend and tabernacle with them throughout eternity. Wait, what? God's going to come down and tabernacle with us throughout eternity? That's written in the book of Jubilees? That was before Yeshua? All right, in 21 verse 10 it says in here, just if you look at the very last bit of the verse, it says, and all who eat thereof will bring sin upon themselves. This is eating something that's killed past the third day, something about that third day. It says, for thus have I found it written in the books of my forefathers, and in the words of Enoch, and in the words of Noah. So several times we're told that these books predated the Torah, predated Jubilees. And then so this is now, let's get into the controversy of Jubilees, is the Sabbath. This is one of the big reasons why people, yes, the dating does not match up with Genesis. I believe there's a reason why, because whoever wrote Genesis and whoever wrote Jubilees, whoever wrote Jubilees knew what Genesis said, and the dates don't match up. Why? I'm not quite sure, but they know. And so you wouldn't write that and knowing that these dates aren't matching up. But why? Is it two different calendars? Very likely, but which calendars? Anyway, the Jubilees is all based off of a 364-day calendar and so forth. But there's some other things in here, some commandments about the Sabbath that people reject. But I'm going to show you that every command that's found in Jubilee that's additional to what we find in the Torah is something that we see referencing the sabbatical millennium, Yeshua's 1,000-year reign, and confirming what is written here. So let's go through it and see. It says, 6 days shall labor be done, but on the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh, your God, and in it you shall do no manner of work, you and your sons and your menservant and your maidservants and all your cattle and and the sojourner also who is with you. Okay, that's what we find that in the Bible. That's part of it. Jubilees continues in 50 verse 8 and says this. It says, and the man that does any work on it shall die. Whoever desecrates that day, whosoever lies with his woman. Wow. So people go, what? You can't lie with a woman on that day? Why not? That's adding to the Torah, right? And one thing with the Torah I want to point out is that there's many commands, like with the Passover. We don't find all the commands for Passover in just one book of the Torah, right? Like the breaking of the bones. We don't find that in all of the books about Passover. It's only found in one certain book. So instead of us saying, oh, that was adding to, no, it's just one of the other books gives you that information. And you need all of the books to be able to put that stuff together. This is the account here, I believe. So it says you shall not lie with a woman. Now watch all these scriptures and see if this is also something that is what's going to take place during the millennium. Watch this. Yeshua answered and said unto them, you do err, not knowing the scripture nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels of heaven. So they're going to be like the angels, not marrying or giving in marriage. Okay, that doesn't exactly point to it, but we'll keep going. In Leviticus it says, if any man's seed of copulation goes out from himself, then he shall wash all of his flesh in water and be unclean until the evening. And every garment and every skin thereon is the seed of copulation, semen, shall be washed with water and be unclean until even. The woman also with whom the man lies with that seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water and be unclean. So you become unclean if you get semen on you during the lying with a woman. Okay, continues in Deuteronomy now. It says in 23:10, it says, and if any man among you becomes unclean because of the nocturnal emission, then he shall go outside the camp. Oh, so you have to go outside the camp when you're unclean. He shall not come inside the camp. But when evening comes, he shall bathe himself in water, and as the sun sets, he may come inside the camp. You shall have a place outside the camp, and you shall go out to it. So when you're unclean, there's a place outside the camp you have to go to. Now on Shabbat, when you're supposed to be gathering together with everybody and having a feast, can you do so if you're outside the camp? Well, some might be saying, well, yeah, but you can do it outside there, no big deal, right? Okay, but can you go into the temple if you're unclean? No. And what is a temple a picture of? The heavenly Jerusalem. So if you can't go in the physical, could you go into the heavenly? Well, let's find out. In Exodus 19:10, when they are preparing the people for Yahweh's arrival to come down, right? What does it say? It says, and Yahweh said to Moses, go to the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow, and let them wash their clothes, right? Like we just saw in that commandment, that they have to wash and be clean. It says, and be ready against the third day. For the third day, Yahweh will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. Are we not waiting for the third day since Yeshua came? He came on day 4, millennial day 4, millennial day 5 and day 6 are 2 days. And on the third day, millennial day 7, where he's coming down and will rule and reign. Well, it says this, and you shall set bonds to the people round about, saying, take heed to yourselves that you go not up into the mount or touch the border of it. Whosoever touches the mount shall be surely put to death. So he continues, there shall not a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through, whether it be beast or man, it shall not live. When the trumpet, the Jubilee, the Jubal, sounds long, that's what that word is there, Jubal, sounds long, they shall come up to the mount. Oh, so they're going to come up to the mount. Okay? And Moses went down from the mount to the people, and he sanctified them, and they washed their clothes. That's interesting. They're washing their clothes, getting prepared for the third day. That's what we are doing. Are we not washing ourselves, getting prepared for Yeshua's arrival? Well, this is very interesting what Moses says about that preparation for that third day, which is also the Shabbat, the seventh millennium. It says, and he said to the people, be ready against the third day. Come not at your wives. Wait, so that Shabbat millennium, we're not going to come at our wives. We got to be ready and be clean. That's why in the Dead Sea Scrolls they wouldn't have sex, they wouldn't go to the bathroom on Shabbat. They made sure that they were ritually and pure for Shabbat. It says, and it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightning and a thick cloud upon the mount and a voice of the trumpet. Well, isn't that what we see when Paul says they're at the last trumpet and there's going to be thunders and lightnings? That is what we see. It is a picture. And they were told not to come at their wives because they're preparing for Shabbat, the 7th millennium. So that all the people that was in the camp, the people that were in the camp, not those that were outside. Those that were in the camp trembled. Because why? If you're unclean, you have to go out of the camp. And Moses brought forth the people. Now he takes them out of the camp. Where? To meet with God. So they had to prepare themselves for the Shabbat. For the third day from when Moses came down, Yeshua came down, being a picture of Moses, on the 4th millennium. And for 2 days, like Hosea says, he's going to strike us. And on the third day, he will raise us up. Why? So that we can meet with God. But we have to be prepared. So the Shabbat is a picture of that. Thus, Jubilees is saying not to lie with your wives, to remain clean so that you don't have to go out of the camp. All right, continuing on. It says, and whosoever shall say he will do something on it, that he will set out on a journey whereon in regard to any buying or selling. So, you can't go on a journey in regard to buying or selling. Okay, that goes online with the Torah. We see that, I think it was in Nehemiah or anyway, when they were keeping the Sabbath and they just couldn't wait for the gates to open so that they could buy and sell again. We don't do buying and selling on Shabbat. That's pretty simple. I think everybody would agree with that. But the journey thing, we'll see here in just a moment, because it mentions it again, but here it's specifically mentioning a journey for buying and selling. It says, and whosoever draws water thereupon, which he had not prepared for himself on the 6th day. The 6th day is the preparation, preparing for the Sabbath, preparing for the Son of Man's reign. And whosoever takes up any burden to carry it out of his tent or out of his house shall die. So the rest of those people will agree with. That's not that big of a deal. The woman thing people didn't agree with, but we can see how it's connected to Yeshua's Sabbath millennial reign. Okay? It continues, Jubilees 50 verse 9. It says, and you shall do no work whatsoever on Shabbat, save what you have prepared for yourselves on the 6th day, as so to eat, drink, and rest. So you prepared your food, like that's what the Torah tells us to. You're going to bake what you're going to bake, boil what you're going to boil on the 6th day, but then you can prepare it to eat. But you didn't cook it on the Shabbat, but you are going to have to cut it and butter it, whatever. Maybe some people will heat stuff up in a pot or whatever, but they don't cook it. It's already cooked. This is, let's call it leftover day. So as to eat and drink and rest and guard the Sabbath from all work on that day. That day. It's a very important day. And to bless Yahweh, your God. So what's that day about? Blessing your God. It goes on. Who has given you a day of feast. Oh, so it's a feast day. A day of eating and praying and blessing God. What else is it? He calls it it says, and a holy day. And a what? Very important, this next verse. Not verse, but these next words. And a day of the holy kingdom. This is the day of the kingdom. You see, Yeshua was anointed on day 4, but he will rule and reign in his kingdom for a 1,000-year period. But then after that, it's a day that comes, the first day, it's a day that never ends, and he turns it back over to the Father. And that's the Shabbat. Well, we see we know it's the Shabbat because we see in John, right? John tells us, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to what? Prepare a place for you. So he's preparing for receiving us. It says, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and Paralabano, take, receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. We have to prepare to meet with God in his Father's house. In Isaiah 58:13, what day does this take place? The Lord's Day. What day is that? Well, it says it here. If you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day. And what day is that? It's Shabbat. And call the Sabbath a delight. We're going to look at that word delight here in a minute. We'll see this again. But he goes on. The holy of Yahweh, honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words. That's what the Shabbat is about, honoring him. And that's exactly what Jubilees is telling us. It is a day of the Holy Kingdom, for who all Israel is this day among their days forever. Ooh, this day is going to be forever. Why? It's a Shabbat that honors the Father, that honors Yeshua, and it is his holy day, the day that he will rule and reign. Continuing on, it says this, for great is the honor which Yahweh has given to Israel, that they should eat and drink and be satisfied on this, it's a feast day, on this feast day, and rest thereon from all labor. Oh, labor, right? That was the curse of Adam, that he had to labor by the sweat of his brow. And it's not until we are changed during the Shabbat millennium that we will no longer labor. It will be rest. It goes on, which belongs to the labor of the children of men, save burning frankincense and bringing oblation and sacrifice. Oh, so we can do the sacrifice. What sacrifices do we give? Praises, thanksgiving, blessing, honor, spiritual sacrifices. Those are pleasing to him. It says, and sacrifices before Yahweh for days and for Shabbats. Okay, so we're going to start getting into where it's starting to get controversial in the next slide, actually. It says, this work shall be done alone on the Shabbat. What's that? The work we just saw, the sacrificing and the burning of the incense and so forth, the daily. It says, in the sanctuary of Yahweh for your God, that they may atone for Ishar El, Israel, the upright El. Why? Because when we are changed, we will become like the sons of God, like the angels in heaven, eternal, and we will be called Israel, the body of Yeshua, the head of Israel. It says, for they may atone for Israel with sacrifice continually from day to day for a memorial, well-pleasing before Yahweh, and that he may receive them always from day to day according as you have been commanded. Now, the last part is mostly, with the exception of the one about the woman, where they reject Jubilees and say it's adding to the Torah because of these commands. It goes on and says this, and every man who does any work thereon or goes on a journey, so now it's not talking about buying or selling, just a journey, or tills his farm, whether in his house or any other place, and whosoever lights a fire or rides on any beast. So all that's pretty self-explanatory, with the exception of journey, because now it's not saying a journey for buying or selling, it's just saying a journey. Though you could imply it's buying or selling, but what I also think it's talking about is this. Matthew 10:10, it says, no, he sent them out to work, right? He says, no script for your journey, neither two coats, neither shoes, nor yet staves. For the what workman is worthy of his meat. So they're going out on a journey to work. What's their work, though? To build the kingdom, to spread the gospel, the good news. But this, the Shabbat, is a picture of the 7,000-year period when they will be able to rest from their journey, from their working, and be able to feast. It goes on. It says now, whosoever lights a fire, right? We know the fire thing. The Sabbath millennium starts with the Great Tribulation by fire. But then there's the 1,000-year period of rest, and at the end of it, it ends with fire coming down from heaven and devouring Hasatan. But during the Shabbat, no fire. Okay. Or rides on any beast. Again, that's pretty self-explanatory, found in the Torah as well. It says, or travels by ship on the sea. So this is another one where they say, oh, you can't travel by ship on the sea. Well, one, I believe it's you don't set out on that journey, but we see many a times that the ships went out and they were out at sea for months. They couldn't dock. I think it means don't set out on a journey by sea on a ship. But let's see something about the millennial kingdom that also references this. Here in Isaiah 33:20, it says, "Look upon Zion, the city of your solemnities. Thine eyes shall see Jerusalem, a quiet habitation, a tabernacle that shall not be taken down." This is the New Jerusalem. "Not one of the stakes thereof shall ever be removed, neither shall any of the cords thereof be broken. But there the glorious Yahweh will be to us a place of broad rivers and streams, wherein shall go no warship nor galley with oars, neither shall a gallant ship pass thereby." So there's going to be no traveling by ship because they're not going to be there. Oh, look at that. On Shabbat, you're not to travel by ship on the sea. What an interesting command that Jubilees puts in there. But that is also a prophecy written about the millennial kingdom found in Isaiah. "And whoever strikes or kills anything, or slaughters a beast or a bird, or whosoever catches an animal or a bird or a fish." So on Shabbat, we can't slaughter a beast. Well, we read earlier the sacrifices that were going to be done on Shabbat, but it didn't mention killing of a beast. It meant there were sacrifices, but ours are spiritual sacrifices. Because why? How can this add to the Torah? Because we know that the priests killed animals on this day for the daily offering. But what we find in Hosea says this. Hosea 2:18, it says, "And in that day will I make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowls of the heaven, and with the creeping things of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the earth. I will make them lie down safely." You mean all of the beasts of the field and all the animals will not have to worry about being killed by man? Oh, well, that's connected to what Jubilees is saying about Shabbat. Not only that, we also see in Isaiah 11:6, "The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and children shall lead them." And Isaiah 65:25, "The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and the dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain," says Yahweh. So the mountain of God, when his reign is set up, beasts aren't going to be hurting beasts, and man are not going to be hurting beasts. So thus we see here the commandment for Shabbat. Is Jubilees adding to the Torah, or is it part of it? Part that we didn't get, but that through the prophets we see is a prophecy about the millennial reign that's going to take place. It goes on and says this, "Or whosoever fasts." So they say, oh, it says you can't fast on the Shabbat. Well, again, I would say that you are not allowed to start a fast on Shabbat. But if you have already started one, like Yeshua, he fasted in the wilderness. And people would say, well, that's not what it says. Well, again, if this is what I believe, and it's pointing to the millennial reign, let's see what Yeshua says about fasting. In Mark 2:19, it says, "And Yeshua said to them, Can the children of the bride chamber fast while the bridegroom is with them? And as long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast." When are we going to be with the bridegroom? During his millennial reign on Shabbat, the Shabbat millennium, the seventh day. And we cannot fast. Mark 2:20, it says, "But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then shall they fast in those days." So you see, the Sabbath, again, is a feast day. We are not to fast on it. But I believe if you're doing a 40-day fast or a 3-day or whatever, if you've started your fast, we see many people in the Bible doing that. That's not what's being told here in Jubilees. It's teaching you something about the Sabbath reign, about the millennial reign. Or it goes on, or makes war on the Sabbath. So a lot of people will say this. Again, same thing. I do not believe that Israel would go out and start a war on Shabbat, but they would defend themselves on Shabbat. But if we look at this being a picture of the future millennial reign Shabbat of Yeshua, what does it say? It says, and he shall judge in Isaiah 2:4, he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. Oh, during the millennial reign, no more war. We also see the eighth day, all of these things taking place because evil is done away with. But during the Sabbath, death will still be there, but people will live longer. But there will be peace on earth. There's no war for 1,000 years. And it'll be a feast. There's no slaughter. The animals don't have to be afraid. We won't have to go on long journeys. Everybody will know Yeshua. We'll be like the angels in heaven, neither marrying nor giving in marriage, but eternal. All of these commandments can be found throughout the Bible as shadows and pictures and allegory of the millennial reign of Yeshua. And it goes on and it says this finally. It says, the man who does any of these things on Shabbat shall die, so that the children of Israel shall observe the Sabbaths according to the commandments regarding the Sabbaths of the land, as it is written on the sapphires, which he gave into the hands that he should write out for you the Torah of the seasons, and the seasons according to the division of their days, wherewith is completed the account of the division of the days. And then it continues on in verse 29 and says this about the 1,000-year reign. Interesting how we just read about that, the Sabbath and so forth, and now we're reading about this. And at the close of the 19th Jubilee, in the 7th week, in the 6th year thereof, Adam died, and all his sons buried him in the land of creation. And he was the first to be buried in the earth, and he lacked 70 years of 1,000 years. For 1,000 years are as one day in the testimony of the heavens, and therefore was it written concerning the tree of the knowledge on the day. So here, Jubilees is specifically telling you that Adam only lived one day. He didn't complete the whole day. He died in that day, being a 1,000-year period. So now when it's talking, Jubilees is talking about the Sabbath day, they're talking about a 1,000-year period. It says, on that day that you eat thereof you shall die. For this reason he did not complete the years of this day, this 1,000-year period, for he died during it. And Peter says the same thing. I believe he got this from Jubilees. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. And then there's verse 9, and then right after that he goes in to tell you the day of the Lord. He just told you how long a day is in the side. It's 1,000 years. How long is the day of the Lord? It's a 1,000-year period. Starts with fire, ends with fire. But during it, there is no fire. It says this, it will come as a thief in the night, in the what? In which the heavens shall pass away with what? A great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and its works that are therein shall be burned up. Starts with fire, ends with fire. And it goes on about this period. When is it? When will it come? It says, then they will say, the days of our forefathers were many, even unto 1,000 years, and were good. But behold, the days of our life, if a man has lived many, are 70 years. And if he is strong, 80 years, and those days are evil. So 70 to 80 years. And that's what we see in Psalms, right? 70 years or 80 if by strength. And I love what Psalm 90 verse 10 says at the end. It says, the years of our life are 70, or even by reason strength 80. Yet there is a span but toil and trouble. Our days are but toil and trouble. And it leaves with this very interesting statement. And they are soon gone, and we fly away. I wonder where we fly to. In that day, Jubilees says this in 23 verse 31. It says, and they will strive with one another, the young with the old, and the old with the young, the poor with the rich, and the lowly with the great, and the beggar with the prince. On account of what? On account of the Torah and the covenant. For they have forgotten the commandments and the covenant, and the feasts, and the months, and the Sabbaths, and the Jubilees, and all judgments. You mean Jubilees prophesied that believers would forget the Torah and say it's done away with? That's what it says. But remember, in Isaiah 38:13, it says, "And if you turn away your foot from my Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day," and call the Sabbath a what? Delight. What is that word delight? It's oneg. It is a feast. That is what we do on Shabbat. We oneg. We sit down, we eat together, we praise the Father, we have a joyous time. Why would we want to do away with that? All of his commandments are love. And it goes on about that when people start to argue about the Torah and come back to it. It says this, "And in those days the children will begin to study the Torah." Oh, you mean just like Abraham and all of them before were doing? They were studying it. Who was giving them the learning and the understanding? The Spirit of God. He is the teacher. But they had to study. So here it says they will study the Torah and to seek the commandments and to return to the paths of righteousness. And the days will begin to grow many and increase amongst those children of men. What? Till their days draw near to 1,000 years. Oh, people are going to live to be 1,000 years old again? And to a great number of years than before was the number of days. Come on, does the Bible really say that? Sure it does. In Isaiah 65:20, "There shall be no more thence an infant of days, nor an old man that has not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed." You mean if somebody dies at 100 years old, they're considered a child? Yep, according to Isaiah and according to Jubilees, which predated the coming of Yeshua, speaking of his reign. And it says this about it also, "And there shall be no old man, nor one who is satisfied with his days. For all of them shall be as children and youths, and all their days shall be complete, and live in peace and in joy, and there shall be no more Satan, nor any evil destroyer, for all their days shall be the days of blessing and healing. And at that time Yahweh will heal his servants, and they shall rise up and see great peace." There is no great peace anywhere in the world for these last 6,000 years. It has been war and toil and acts of violence. But this time will be the time of peace. And he says, and he will drive out their adversaries. And the righteous shall see and be thankful and rejoice with joy forever and ever, and shall see all the judgments and their curses on their enemies. And it finishes up this last little bit of Jubilees with this. "And their bones shall rest in the earth, and their spirits shall have much joy." So there's a time coming when your spirit, you will revive and have much joy. "And they shall know that it is Yahweh who executes judgment and shows mercy to hundreds and thousands, and to all that love him. And do you, Moses, write down these words, for thus they are written, and they are recorded on the heavenly tablets for a testimony for the generations forever." The book of Jubilees. So, all right. I wanted to put that forward with Jubilees because what it says about Shabbat, people say, "Oh, get rid of it because it's adding to the Torah." But like I showed you, we can go through the Bible, and there's multiple other places that give reference to things about the millennial kingdom that we can reference from there. All right. Now I want to go in real quick to the calendar. This is not a teaching on the calendar, but I want to show you a few things about the calendar that a lot of people miss. Again, they claim it's just a solar calendar. It's not. It's a solar, lunar, and stars. I'm not talking about the stars in this one, just the connection between the lunar, right, the moon being referred to prophetically as the wife or the woman, and the sun, and there's a correlation between the two. So let's go real quick. Again, I'm not going to talk about all this. One of these days I will do a calendar teaching, but there's still some things that before I put out my whole calendar teaching, I want to get ironed out. But you've seen me talk about this before, the day and then the day and year correlation. A lot of people don't know this, but most calendars, if not all, start their day when they start their new year in a biblical reference of a 360-degree circle, correlation. And so what I mean is, like, during the 6 months of summer and what we would call spring and summer, but biblically is just summer, 6 months of great light is a picture also of the 12 hours of day. And then the 6 months of winter or darkness is also a picture of the day of night. And so on the Gregorian calendar, we start our year in the middle of the winter in December, right? Going over to January, and then you have 3 more months until the equinox. So, but that's when we start our calendar. We also start our day at midnight, so you can see the correlation between the two. The Jewish calendar starts on the 7th month, which correlates to the fall, or also sunset. And that's when they start their day. Well, it's my belief that the biblical calendar starts at spring, which correlates to when the sun rises in the morning. So, and most calendars work that way. But I want to talk about real quick how the sun moves across the horizon, just to help you understand what I'm going to talk about here shortly. We're not going to go too deep into it. But this is basically the 364 Enoch, Dead Sea Scrolls, Jubilees calendar. You can see that they're bear with me, I know this doesn't make sense right now, but looking at it, the equinox is right there running through the middle, okay? And we're looking at a horizon, and after the sun crosses the equinox, which is called Tekufa, then it starts out the first month, and it starts moving to the north to the second month, third month, and then it goes up for those 3 months. That's the first, what we would call season, such as spring. And then it starts what we would call summer, but I believe that whole 6 month period the Bible calls summer, the 4th month, and then goes the 5th month, 6th month. Starting the 1st month is an equinox. Starting from the 4th month is what we'd call the solstice. And then we go through the other equinox into the 7th month. And then in the next season, we start the 10th month. That's at the solstice. And so to understand this, what's happening is, if you didn't move and looked at the east at sunrise every day and you could speed it up, you would see the sun rise continually, and it would, as it's rising, it would keep moving towards the north and just keep moving through what's called the gate 4 in Book Enoch, and then it goes through gate 5 and then into gate 6. So it moves through those 3 gates, and then it comes to an extremity point that it quits moving north, and it seems like it stops for a day, and then it starts going backwards. When it stops, that's called the solstice, or in Psalms 19:6, it's the extremity. Some people call that day also a tekufa. I'm hesitant. I believe the equinox is the tekufa. But anyway, so then the sun starts moving back through those gates, back through the 6th gate, back through the 5th, back through the 4th, and then after the equinox, which is fall, it starts moving south into the 3rd gate, then into the 2nd, then into the 1st gate, a total of 6 gates, and then it comes to its extremity, which is now the winter solstice. Okay, so looking at that, that's how, if you were not to move, and now it goes back through those gates, 1, 2, 3, and now it's completed its complete circuit of a year back to the equinox, and starts doing the same thing again. And I show kind of like that figure 8 there, but that's what Psalm says. His going forth from the tekufa is from extremity, so it goes all the way to the extremity of heaven, and thus his circuit goes back to tekufa unto the extremity, the solstice, back to the tekufa. So that's how it moves. And now if we look at the calendar, how that works, as it moves, it's the 1st month, going through the 4th gate, then it moves to the 2nd month, going through the 5th gate, and then it goes through the 3rd month, the 6th gate, comes to the solstice, 1 day, and then starts coming back. Now you have the new season, the 4th month, 5th month, 6th month, crosses the equinox into new season, into the 7th month, into the 3rd gate, 8th month, 1st gate, 9th month, 1st gate, and then comes back down and starts moving. Now, it doesn't go up and down like that. I'm just trying to show you the calendars as it works its way through, and then over into the 11th and 12th month, back to the equinox. So I hope that makes sense. I tried to make this look as simple as possible. And you can see if you look at the months or the weeks, down at the very bottom left, they go from right to left, and the counting goes that way to show you the direction it's going only. I know that might confuse some people, but you can see it doesn't change anything. It's just I show going left to right, and then I show the calendar going right to left at the top, and then the bottom again going right to left. So I hope that makes sense. All right, but what's important here is I want to show you something that some people overlook, and that's how important the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 12th, and the correlation in all of those. Okay, the 1st and the 7th, the 1st month, when we start our 1st month, the other half of the world is starting their 7th month. When we start our 7th month, the other half is starting their 1st. So there's a correlation between 1 and 7. We'll also see that there's a correlation between 4. Okay? Because you can see that on 1, 4, 7, and also 10, that's when the new seasons start. Okay? But on the weekly calendar, also the millennial calendar, we see that on the 1st day, the light and darkness were separated. So equal light, equal darkness. But on the 4th day is when the sun of righteousness is seen, the physical image of the sun in the midst of the week, or in the middle. Okay? And then it's going to return on the 7th. But what I'm going to show you on a calendar, on a 12-month calendar, if we look at this, we'll come back to that slide here in a second. But if you look at month 1, which we would call March or April, that starts the biblical feasts of what people call the spring feasts. It's nowhere in the Bible called that. But these are the start of the year. We have a feast on the 15th day, which is unleavened bread for 7 days. Okay? And as you go to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th month, we now are going to move past the equinox into the 7th month. Well, what I want you to see is that 7th month for us correlates to the 1st month or spring to the southern hemisphere. Now, they don't change their month. They still call it the 7th. But for us in the 1st month, when things are springing up that were grown, that's what's happening in the southern hemisphere on our 7th month. So you can see the correlation here. For us, our 7th month would be like our 7th month would be like their 1st month. Their 1st month would be like our 7th month, and vice versa, if that makes sense. So there's that correlation to 1 and 7. What happens in our 1st month also happens in the 7th month, as if it was their 1st month. So I hope that's making sense. And then also, if you look at the start of the 4th month, we have the sun is at its highest point. So if I go back here, right, our start of our 4th month is the hottest day of the year. Not the hottest day, but the most light. The longest day, we call it the solstice. But for the southern hemisphere, it's the least amount of light for them. But when you go through the year, it flips. And so now in our winter, when it's summer for us, it's winter for them. When it's winter for them, it's summer for us. Okay? So you can see the correlation there, the 4 and the 10, and the 7 and the 1. And then also, what's interesting is if you count that way, the 1 and the 7 and the 4, when we come to the calendar, 1, 4, and 7. So if I was to count 6 days, and then on the 7th, it's also correlating like 1. So we should see things happening, just as in the beginning on the 1st day there was the light, then the light was separated. We see that the sun comes, the Son of Man comes on day 4. So there's that correlation of 4. That's when he comes, but then he's coming again on 7. So I know, bear with me as we go forward with this, because I want to point this out before we go on to anything else that we have to do. The Dead Sea Scrolls a year. So what people don't understand is there's an equilux and there's an equinox. The equilux means equal light. The equinox means equal night. So equal light, equal night. People would say, well, what's the difference? If there's equal light, there's also equal night. Well, yes, but these are defined 2 different ways, and this is what they mean, but what they're used for is the equilux happens on one day, and then a few days later or 3 days later, we have what's called equinox. Okay, 2 to 3 days later. Now let me show you what that means. So the equinox is an astronomical event when the sun is directly above the Earth's equator, while the equilux is the specific date when the location experiences a precisely equal duration of day and night. The equilux occurs a few days before the spring equinox, a few days after the equinox due to atmospheric refraction and the sun's apparent size. So, what does that mean? You see, the equilux, when they're measuring the equal daylight, equal darkness, they start daylight before the sun is up. Just as the sun starts to touch, you can't see the sun, there's no visible image of it yet, but as it starts to touch, that's what's called equal. That's when they start the measurement of day. Okay? And so at that point, the time when there's equal daylight and equal darkness, the sun's not visible yet when they started. Very interesting. And then once the sun rises and then once it goes away, that's the equal daylight, equal darkness. Okay, if that makes sense. But the equinox, because of the refraction, is when the sun is directly in the midst of the heaven, directly overhead in the midst. So what I find interesting, and there you can see there the equinox, how that works out as it's pointing almost at like a 12 o'clock position, the equinox, and 6 o'clock position on the other equinox. And they flip-flop for the summer and winter for the 2 different hemispheres. But what's interesting about this is that this is also what we see in creation. On day 1, equal daylight, equal darkness, the equilux. Then 3 days later, on day 4, is when the visible image of the sun comes. And why that's interesting is because that's how the Dead Sea Scrolls does their calendar. Though light started on day 1, it was equal daylight, equal darkness, or the dividing of light and day. But the sun wasn't visible, wasn't created, wasn't there until day 4 to start that counting and start that moving. And so I just wanted to point out that we are here at the very end of day 6, getting close to Yeshua's return. But here you can see, if you look at the calendar year 1, this is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. If you look at the first month there, I've put in equal daylight, equal darkness. And most of the time, if you ask Google or whatever, the dates for the equilux versus the equinox, it's usually 3 days after. And I find that very interesting. So the equilux on the first day, 3 days later, equinox. Okay, I wanted to point that out because a lot of people don't pick up on that there is a difference between the two. Equinox is also when people call it the straight line shadow, when the shadow casts a directly small straight line, the smallest straight line shadow. Okay, but equilux is equal daylight, equal darkness, because you actually see the sun before, or the light, and you see the sun before because of refraction, before it's up. I know a little confusing, but equilux versus equinox, just remember it happens 3 days later. So what people don't know about the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar is that it does track the moon. And as you can see on here, I've placed the moon on here. Before we get to there, the 4 months. So each season is 3 months, and you can see if you watch, it starts over. Okay, So the first day of the first month starts on a Wednesday. The second month it starts on a Friday, and the sixth day. So if you guys don't know, the weeks were not Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. They were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so on the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar, day 1 of month 1 starts on the 4th day or a Wednesday. Month 2 it starts on the 6th day or Friday, and month 3 it starts on the 1st day or Sunday. Very interesting. So you see these 3 months? You get down to the second season and they're now equal. Third, still equal. Fourth, equal. So you can see every 4th month they reset. Interesting about 4. Okay, keep that in mind. Also with the moon now, you can see on the year 1, there is 2 full moons on the first month, at the very first day of the month and the last day of the month. This will only happen ever in the first month. That's it. And we're going to see that it's going to happen again, but nowhere else in this whole year does that happen. Only in the first month. Also, what I want to point out here is that Gamul starts the month, or starts the year, here. And we're going to see that these Gamul, and they, instead of doing 2 courses per year like all of the other courses, they do 3. And you can see that here. So they have to do 3 courses. They start the year. Whoever starts the year also ends the year. You can see that. The whole list of them, they end the year. Okay? And you can see down there at the very bottom, Jediah ends the year, but now when he's going to start the next year, you see Jediah here in the list of courses. They run. There's 24 of them, and most of them do 2 times per year. They run their course, except for whoever starts the year will also end the year. That group of 5 courses will do 2 or 3 times per year, if that's making sense. So watch as we go to year 2. So now you can see it's Jediah that starts it now, and Harim, Sarim, and so forth. But you can see the moon is now, the full moon is not, it's moved. And if you look at all the full moons, none of them are like they were before. Okay, so it just shows you where you are. The moon shows you where you are in the Moedim cycle of the sabbatical year. Okay, so Jediah now starts it. He's going to run 3 times. They're going to have to do 3 times this year. Everybody else only does 2. Okay? And you can see the next people, all the courses are going to move a month backwards. That's how this goes. So you can see these guys here, Midjaim, he's now the one that is going to start it. This is year 3, and you can see there's the moon, not like it was before again. And these guys again do 3 courses. Everybody else does 2. Okay, next one, it's going to move back as we move to the next year. So Zechariah ends the last course of the year in month 12. Again, starts it the first week of the next year. Now we're in year 4. So what I want to point out here for year 4 is, look, now for the 4th year, the midst of the week, we have the double light, the 2 full moons again. We had it on the 1st year, and now we have it again on the 4th year. That's interesting, that cycle of repeating on the 4th. You see the moon, how it repeats every 4th. We saw how the courses, or the months, every 4th month, it repeats the start of the weeks, 1 and 4. And then we're also going to see a repeating pattern on 7. And what repeats on the 7th year? The courses. So as you can see, Shechaniah now does 3 courses, and then these guys are going to move back. Okay, so real quick as we go through, I wanted to point out again, the first, we started with 2 full moons on the 1st year. And in the 4th year, 2 full moons start the month. We're not going to see it again. Guess when? Until the 7th year. But also something else resets the 7th year. It's the courses. So watch. Now we go to year 5. Here we go. The moon it's a repeating pattern, but the courses are still working their way backwards. And these guys, again, work 3 courses. Everybody else works 2. Okay, the month is still different in year 6. And now at this point, everybody has completed their courses. And guess who's going to come next in year 7? There it is. Gamul. So we see now the 7th year, that repeating pattern of the moon. 2 full moons in the first month. That's the only time you will ever have 2 full moons on the first month, or any month, is the 1st year, the 4th year, and the 7th year. Okay? And now it's going to repeat. And this is going to keep going, because the 1st year also is identical to the 7th year. I could take away year 7 up there and put year 1, and they would look the same with the moon and everything else, how it works, the repeating patterns. Okay? And now Gamul is the same thing as it was then. Same as year 1. No difference. So when we look up here, like we talked about, we go through 6 months in the northern hemisphere, but then the southern hemisphere does their 6 months. But their first month is just like our 7th month. It's a repeating pattern. The 1, the 4, and the 7 through a 12-month cycle. If I was to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then count 7 as 1, it would repeat the same way backward. Well, not backwards, but in that same, it would repeat back over. Though we would say 14 days, but they repeat 1, 4, 7, and so forth. And I find that very interesting. Not a lot of people pick up on that. So as we go through this, we can see as the repeating pattern. It goes through the 4th gate, 5th gate, 6th gate, starts going back 5, 6. The pattern repeats now. What happened for us in the northern hemisphere now happens for them in the southern hemisphere. A repeating pattern as they come through. So we go through our spring and summer, then they go through their fall and winter, or we go through our fall and winter, but while we're going through fall and winter, they go through spring and summer. Again, a repeating pattern only found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it makes so much sense. But what's interesting to me is that those are gates, but they also correlate, like I said, to the 7 days of creation, of the light entering into each gate, just as the weeks work out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 4, and 7 have a repeating pattern. 1 and 7 have a repeating pattern. Every 4th year, just like every 4th month, repeats for the 2 full moons. Right? Every 7th day is also as the 1st day for the courses, a repeating pattern. Okay, sorry, going back. So I hope that makes sense. And it all has to do with light and the moving of the light and the returning of the light. So again, as it moves through the courses 4, 5, 6, goes back through 6, 5, 4, into 3, 2, 1, and then 1, 2, 3, and then repeats. And it's a flip-flop for the other hemisphere. Okay, so why is that important? It's very important because the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar is a 364-day calendar. But the equinox to equinox, a tropical year, equals 365.2425. So that means the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar has an excess, there's excess days than what the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the Dead Sea Scrolls calendar is going to end, but we're not ready for the equinox. It's still 1.2422 days away. So what do? Do you start your calendar? Some people will do what's called intercalation of a week or a day. I'm not getting into that here. I will talk a little bit about it here in a minute, but not too much, but this is what I want to point out. Okay, the Gregorian calendar fixes this because they're a 365-day calendar. So there's only 0.2422 days that are in excess for them. So for them, it says rounding up and inserting a 24-hour day every 4 years. That's the 29th of February that we put in every 4 years on the Gregorian calendar. But that adds about 45 extra minutes to every 4-year leap cycle. And what happens is that adds up to about 3 days every 400 years. So how do they correct for that? It says that years that are divisible by 100 don't have leap days unless they're also divisible by 400. So if the year is divisible by 100, they have a leap. They correct for that. That are divisible by 100, they don't have leap days unless it's divisible by 400. So every 100 years, you're not going to have a February 14th on that year. Unless it's divisible by 400, then you will. That's how they correct for it. Well, there's nothing in the Dead Sea Scrolls that tells us how to correct for it. But what I want to show is that the Dead Sea Scrolls, for some reason, I showed you that 7-year calendar because in all actuality, it only records 6 years and then it stops. Why? Because it knows that it resets. And so now the next year, the 7, starts back over and the whole cycle continues. There's nothing different. So it only gives you 6 years. Well, now it starts plugging in Jubilee years. But the same thing applies with that. It only goes through 6 Jubilees, plugging dates in to show you. But then it knows after that, it's going to repeat. So it continues after that continually. Nothing. There's nothing else to add. So what does that mean? That means the Dead Sea Scrolls gives you 6 Jubilees, which is a period of 294 years. That 294 years, if you do no intercalation, you're going to get 1.2422 days behind every year. Well, a period of 6 Jubilees, or 294 years, you know what's very interesting? If you take that time and add it together, this is what you get, right? 49 Jubilees times 6 is 294. 294 years, if you don't intercalate in 1.2422 days excess, you times that by that, you're going to get 365.2 days. That is not coincidence. The Jubilee calendar only records 6 Jubilees. And when it does so, it leaves excess time on the equinoxes. From equinox to equinox, we come in 1.2422 days too short. Well, if we keep doing that, it keeps backing up and starting earlier than the equinox. And if you keep doing that for 294 years, exactly, you come to the exact same day. 365.2 days. You come back one exact tropical year. That cannot be coincidence. They knew that there was a 365.2422 day. However, they show us no intercalation. Maybe they did and it was kept secret, I don't know. But also maybe, like I lean to believe, that the calendar will reset and go to exactly 364 days when Yeshua returns, or we're going to learn the intercalation method, either 1 week, 1 day, a month, but when? We don't find that. Some people believe they found it and they add 1 day to every year. Well, every 4 years, the same thing. You're going to still be behind. Now you're going to have to add 2 days. The week also works. People will just say, hey, the first Wednesday after the equinox, just go with that, start the calendar. But again, this isn't to be a teaching. I wanted to show you this because it's very interesting to me. All right. I find this interesting in Jubilees 23:27 when he celebrates. This is when Jacob is celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. It says that there was yet another day, and he sacrificed thereon according to all that he had sacrificed on the former days, and he called its name Addition. For this day was added. That word addition means like a cease or a stop. Not Sabbath, but to stop, to cease. This was added, and the former days he called the feast. And thus it was manifest that it should be, and it is written on the heavenly tablets. Therefore it was revealed to him that he should celebrate it and add it to the 7 days of the feast. This is the 8th day, the last great day. Now, if you keep reading, it goes on to say, and the next day was the 23rd. So the 7 days is the 15th, the 16th, 17th, 18th, the 19th, 20th, and the 21st. The 8th day is the 22nd, and then it goes on and says the 23rd. So a lot of people might believe, well, he added the day there and stopped counting. So you had 2 days that were actually 1 day, and that's how that works. Again, if you do that every 4 years, you're still going to have to add another day somehow. But I don't think that that's what that's saying there. Anyway, moving on from there. So they did no intercalation. You don't see that in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're just showing you over a period of 294 years on a 364-day calendar. They're plugging in the feasts and everything else. But they only give you 294 years, 6 Sabbaths. And they started out by only giving you 6 years. And what I mean by that is they plug in all the dates for those first 6 years, and then they stop. They leave the 7th up to you because it recycles just like the first year, the 7th year. And the same thing with 6 Jubilees. Now when you get to the 7th, it's going to be the same as the first. It recycles. It's called a grand cycle. 294 years. There's no intercalation. And because of that, the Zadok year being 364 days, the Gregorian year being 365.2425, but the tropical year from equinox to equinox, 365.24219, is 1.2422 behind. That equals 294 years, 1.2422 days behind equals exactly 365.2 days, exactly 1 year behind. And now you will not get more than a day behind. Over 7,000 years, you're not going to get but just a little. It's perfect almost. It would take so long for this to get more than a day behind, but that math is crazy to me. All right. So what's important about that as well with these Jubilees? I believe in Daniel, he's given a 70 weeks prophecy of years, but I also believe he's given a 70 weeks prophecy of Jubilees, and here's why. It says, "In 70 weeks are determined upon the people and upon the holy city to finish transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy, to anoint the most holy." 70 weeks. And so Sabbath is 7 days, a Shabuah is 7 weeks, or 7 sevens, a sabbatical year is 7 years, and a Jubilee it's the 50th year, but it's a Shabuah of years, so 7 times 7 weeks of years, which is 49 years. So could Daniel have been saying both, that it's a Sabbath of years and also a Sabbath of Jubilees of Shabuah? And that would, because the Sabbath of years is 490 years. That worked to Yeshua's first coming. But what about the second coming? Well, here's what's interesting. The Jubilee is, 49 years, and the 50th year is the actual Jubilee. But if you take 70 Jubilees, so that's 49 times 70, you're going to get 3,430 years. That's a lot of years. So what do we do with that? Well, if you plug all that information in, we'll talk about here in a minute, it's going to take you to a certain date. But we have to get a number, okay? And from Jubilees 50, verse 3 through 4, it says this, "And the land also shall guard its Sabbaths, while they dwell upon it, and they shall know the Jubilee year. Wherefore I have ordained for you the year weeks and the years of the Jubilees. There are 49 Jubilees from the days of Adam until this day." This is when he's on Mount Sinai writing the Torah, writing the book of Jubilees. And he says, "And 1 week in 2 years," okay, 1 week is 7 years, and 2 years, that's 9 years. So, and there are yet 40 years to come for learning the commandments. This is when they're going to be in the wilderness for 40 years learning the commandments of Yahweh, until the Passover into the land of Canaan, crossing the Jordan to the west. So what is he saying? Well, if we plug in that time, he said that there's 49 Jubilees from Adam until there. That's 2,401 years. Well, if you add the 2 years to that, plus the 7 years that it just says, right? 1 week and 2 years. So 2,401 plus 7 plus 2 equals 2,410. And then it says there are 40 years to come after that. So add 40 to that, you get 2,450. Well, what's interesting about 2,450 is that is exactly 50 Jubilees. So what is he saying? He's telling you that they go into the promised land after the completion of 50 Jubilees, on the 51st Jubilee. So, doing the math here, if we go from 0 to 50, we know that 50 Jubilees expired when they went into the land. Okay, most scholars would agree that the children of Israel went into the land around 1400 BC. Well, 1406 is when they crossed the Jordan, but they were at war and fighting for 7 years, and they had peace and settled in the year 1400 BCE. So now if we take those 70 Jubilees, the 3430, and add it to the 50 Jubilees, guess what year we get? 2030. That's very interesting. So the people of Israel became a people when they crossed into the land and they had their land. And he says 70 Shabuah, and that could be weeks of years, but it could also be weeks of Jubilees, are determined upon your people. And he even goes on to talk about the time of the end, in troublous times. And also, if you add 50 to 70, that's 120 Jubilees. It's a 6,000 year period. When he says that my spirit shall not always strive with man, but their years are 120. Some people also believe that he might have been referring to Jubilees, which is 6,000 years, and then the seventh comes. And when does the seventh come? Could it be telling us this time? I don't know. I just found that interesting. I wanted to share that with you. So again, also with these Jubilees, we said Moses goes up 40 days, comes down 40 nights, 40 days, and he does this. And it's very interesting because if you plug in those Jubilees, we see that from 0 to 40, 40 is when Abraham left Haran on 1953, right? The 40th Jubilee ends in 1960. So 40 Jubilees are completed when he sees the promised land. And then from that time to Yeshua coming is another 40 Jubilees. It works out that way. And then from when Yeshua came the first time to when he returns, another 40 years, 40 Jubilees. These aren't exact, but they're right at those times. Equals 120 Jubilees. Very interesting math. And also what I wanted to show you with that is the names of these women. Remember the moons were connected to this cycle of fours? I find it interesting that Jacob had 4 wives. 2 women, the older and the younger, but then they also had 2 concubines that were joined to them. We see in Ezekiel that there is Judah and Ephraim, and those joined to them, the 2 women. And we see here in Ezekiel that Ephraim, Samaria, is Aholah, the elder. Aholah is the elder, just like Leah was the elder. And then Oholabah, Jerusalem, is the younger, just like Rachel. And those joined to them. 4 wives. And we see that the moons, the double lights, have a cycle of the 4 years. Anyway, I just found that interesting. All right. So going through this, I just want to hit these real quick. The Hebrew language of creation. You guys can read through these. But it says that the language which was revealed, it had ceased from the mouths of all the children of men from the day of the overthrow of Babel. Okay, Noah spoke Hebrew, but Hebrew stopped at Babel. All the languages were changed to 70 languages. But that Hebrew language, it says it's the language of creation, and all the books were written in Hebrew for the language of creation. And it says that they studied these books. Right? And who gives you the understanding? The Father's Spirit. But they were originally in Hebrew, because I know a lot of people argue about this, but the book of Jubilees and the Targums talk about it. They were written from Noah knew Hebrew, but not everybody before the flood spoke Hebrew. There was different angels. They had their own languages and everything that were carved pictographic languages on the rocks. But after the flood, Noah was the only one that spoke Hebrew. He may have known other languages, I don't know. But that's the one language they spoke until Babel. That's what it just told us in Jubilees. Then after Babel, nobody knew Hebrew. But it goes on and says of Abraham, it says, and I opened his mouth and his ears and his lips, and I began to speak to him in Hebrew, in the tongue of creation. Right? And he took the books of his fathers, which were written in Hebrew, and he studied them. And it's God's Spirit that gave him the understanding. Right? Study to show yourselves approved, rightly dividing the word of truth. We have to study. Seek the knowledge of God. I know a lot of people are out there saying that the knowledge is, that people are being puffed up with knowledge, but we are to seek it. Okay, and then also we see our facts that found writings of the former generations, right, from the angels and stuff carved on rock. We see that all over the world today. And it contained the teaching of the Watchers. In the Targums, it says the holy language, which was the Hebrew word, which he created at the beginning. And the scripture was fulfilled, right? Which goes on. Sorry, we're moving on to the friend of God. I know this is getting really long, so I'm going to hurry this up. The former generations were called the friend of God. What does it mean to be called the friend of God? He chose Abraham's seed as his friend. And Abraham was his friend forever. God had said that he would give it to him, to his seed, right? And he recorded on the heavenly tablets as a friend of God in Jubilees. But why? How did he become the friend of God? It says, you adulterous nations, it says, know you not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God, and whoever therefore will be a friend of the world is an enemy of God. So, being a friend of the world, you're an enemy of God. How do you become a friend of God, though? It says, and he believed in Yahweh, and it was counted unto him as righteousness. And he said to him, I am Yahweh that brought you up out of the Chaldees to give you this land to inherit it. He believed him. And again in the Damascus document, just as Abraham, it says in verse 2 there, Abraham did not walk in it. What? The stubbornness of heart. And he was counted as a friend of God. For why? Keeping God's precepts and following. And the desire of his spirit, he didn't follow his own. He followed God by keeping his commandments. Just like he passed on to Isaac and Jacob, and they were written as friends of God. And they entered as members of the covenant. Why? Keeping his commandments. And the children of Israel, that they should not commit sin, nor transgress the ordinances, nor break the covenant, which has been ordained for them, but that they should fulfill it and record it, and be recorded as friends. So how do you become friends of God? By keeping his commandments. You become children of God. You become joined to him. Last thing I wanted to point out before we finish this up is the wrath of God. We see that from the Targums, they remember not his hand, his son. And so who is come to deliver them from the enemy. And who is the enemy? The enemy is the fierceness, the anger, the wrath, the indignation that the Father sends, sending evil angels among them. And his anger is referred to as this destruction that is coming, the one that's cast down. The Didache tells us that the world deceiver that's cast down will come as the Son of God. But he is a deceiver. And many will look on him as the Son of God, but he is the deceiver. The true Son of God we know by keeping his commandments so that we will not be deceived. Again, it says that during the resurrection and so forth, at the voice of the trumpet, the rift in heaven, it says of the resurrection, but not all, and the saints will be with him. This is from the Didache. You can go ahead and read those. I know this is getting really long. But it says, the master shall instruct the sons of light and shall teach them, right? We know that Yeshua is our teacher, not the Sadducees, not the Pharisees, not the rabbis, his spirit. And he's going to teach them the nature of all the children of men and what kind of spirit they possess. And in the Damascus document, I wanted to point out that the people from Israel, these priests, they went out in the land of Damascus. That's where Paul went out to. They were the ones that were preparing the way for the new covenant. And we will do that next teaching on the Dead Sea Scrolls about the books written for Josephus and so forth about the Essens, and we will connect it and show that they are the Zadok priesthood. So, out there in the land of Damascus. Anyway, I hope this teaching has blessed you. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you peace. Shalom.